My name is Dr. Eris Thorne, and I am 42. If you look through scientific journals, you will find my name among the authors of breakthrough papers on gene regeneration. If you speak with my colleagues, they'll likely say that I'm obsessed with my work, that I rarely go home, and that I have almost no personal life. They would be right. Almost. To the scientific community, I am a pioneer. To millions of potential patients, a beacon of hope. And for my family, I am the strange son who refused to follow the prescribed path. They believe I traded a future for illusions, that I abandoned the family business for laboratory dust and hypotheses. In a way, they are right, but only in that I did indeed reject their path. As for the dust, it was far cleaner than their lavish receptions. Now, I'm riding down Fifth Avenue in a black limousine, alone. Outside the window, the city lights fly by, blurring into abstract reflections on the tinted glass. Noisy, glittering Manhattan, the city where I became who I was meant to be, feels both distant and enveloping. I should be on top of the world, feeling triumphant. But instead, a strange mixture pulses within me, a dull anger and a piercing loneliness. The Thorne Medical Gala is the apex of the year, time to celebrate the corporation's 50th anniversary. They call it a celebration of legacy. Whose legacy? I have a theory. Every time the word legacy escapes the lips of Marcus Thorne, my father, someone, somewhere, sells a piece of their soul in exchange for a seat at a table with silver cutlery. I didn't want to be here. I swore to myself I would never return. But there are moments when the silence is too loud, when something inside you demands to be let out. I didn't come for them. I came for myself, for the truth, and, perhaps, for revenge. Maybe I allowed myself to believe, just for a moment, that things would be different. That 20 years was long enough to heal the cracks, to stop feeling like a shadow in family photographs. Naive. My phone lit up, and that hope shattered. A text from my mother, as dry as parchment. Eris, for God's sake, I heard you were planning to say something about your work. Don't bore people with your scientific ramblings. It's an embarrassment to the Thorne name. I stared at the screen as if it were a death sentence. So many years had passed, but the phrasing was the same. You are not what we need. You are an inconvenience. A mistake we failed to correct. My fingers clenched, nails digging into my palm. My pulse quickened. An embarrassment? I gave my youth to this work. I sacrificed my health, time, and sleep. I risked everything to create something that could change human biology. And she was afraid someone in an evening gown might get bored? Have you ever had your closest relatives call your life's purpose ramblings? Tell me, how did you survive? How did you not go mad? Because I survived. I'm here. And tonight, I have no intention of staying silent. They expect me to quietly raise a glass of champagne, smile in front of a banner with the corporate logo, and vanish into the shadow of Julian, my perfect brother. But I'm not a shadow anymore. I am the light. The first memory that comes to mind isn't a moment of triumph in the lab or my first scientific publication. It's my father's voice in the mahogany-paneled living room, where the air smelled of my mother's perfume and whiskey. I was 22. I stood by the fireplace, clutching a letter from Princeton, an invitation to their graduate program. Are you serious? He asked, not looking at me, but through his glass. I nodded, and for a fleeting moment, I thought he was proud. He looked up. There was no pride in his eyes, not even surprise. Only weariness. Pure science is not for the Thornes. Our name was built in boardrooms, not in flasks and test tubes. You are wasting your talents playing God. This isn't a business, Eris. It's an illusion. I wanted to argue, to prove him wrong, but my tongue was stuck to the roof of my mouth. I just walked out in silence. From that evening on, I stopped seeking his approval. Or, at least, I tried to. My family is a well-oiled PR machine. They know how to look, how to speak, how to create a myth. The myth of a perfect dynasty of medical benefactors. It's just that in this myth, there's no room for the son who chose a laboratory over an office on the 42nd floor. I look out the limousine window again. The city changes, but my role in this family does not. I'm a loose thread, an awkwardness, a strange guest at a celebration of others' victories. I remember one trip home. Back then, I was still trying. I drove to Greenwich, to the mansion that looked like it was out of a magazine. The lawn was like something from a movie. Inside, there were photos of Julian in his Harvard gown, on yachts, holding trophies. In the library, a portrait of my grandfather. On the mantelpiece, a smiling Julian with a senator. My photo? A solitary picture, lost between books on 19th century literature. A photo from my dissertation defense. Not even in a frame. Not even on display. I didn't belong there. Not then, not now. But if you spend your whole life not belonging, you learn to create your own place. I'm almost at the museum. The driver asks if you should wait. I nod. Let him wait. Tonight, no one knows how long this evening will last. I pull a small flash drive from my inner pocket. It's metal, matte, almost unnoticeable. It holds everything. The research. The proof. The emails. I could send this to a journal tomorrow. Or tonight. Or right now. But that would be too easy. No. I want them to look me in the eyes when the truth lands on them like a hammer. Not revenge justice. Not anger purification. I'm not alone. Somewhere on the other side of the city, Lena is in her lab. We're in contact. She knows what to do if I give the signal. Tonight might not just be an end. It could be a beginning. My beginning. The real one. I step out of the car. The museum lights are blinding. The red carpet. The photographers. Words of welcome that sound false. I smile the way they want me to. But inside me, a storm is raging. I walk inside. And it all begins. The Egyptian wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art is a monument to time. Stone, sand, the sense of an ancient world. Everything here is a reminder of mortality, that even pharaohs clad in gold could not escape oblivion. I feel at home, not because I'm dead, but because I know that anything built on lies will, sooner or later, crumble. Even pyramids turn to dust. Through the columns, I see the guests. Men in tuxedos, women in gowns that drift across the marble like clouds. They aren't here for medicine, not for ideas. They are here for themselves. For the photos, for the success story they want to believe in. A story where Marcus Thorne is the patriarch, Julian is the heir, and I am the absent character best left unmentioned. A wandering shadow. But tonight, the shadow has come into the light. I move slowly along the walls, studying the faces. I don't know most of them. They are part of the Thorne ecosystem, investors, politicians, celebrities. Some nod, some look away. I notice a few journalists from scientific publications, but none of them know what I'm holding in my jacket pocket. Otherwise, they wouldn't be drinking champagne. They'd be calling their editors. Julian appears at the entrance. He's easy to spot. He carries himself as if he owns the room. Tall, with a perfect haircut, impeccably dressed. His companion, Carmen, his fiancée, looks at him with an expression of half reverence, half calculation. She knows who she's sleeping with. He notices me, nods, even smiles. Theatrically, ironically. He's used to my silent presence, rare, harmless. He doesn't know that tonight is different. Tonight, I'm not a guest. I'm a catalyst. A waiter approaches. I take a glass of water. I don't want alcohol. I want to feel every second, every vibration in the air. I've been walking toward this moment for too long to allow myself a clouded mind. Eris. A familiar voice. I turn. My mother. Her face is tense, but her smile is stretched perfectly. She touches my arm. You came after all. How lovely. I notice her gaze. She's studying me, trying to figure out what I'm planning. Is she afraid? Maybe. But, as always, she's trying to keep her composure. Good evening, Mother. You look well. Though, you probably could have worn something a bit more festive. I'm in mourning, I reply dryly. Her eyes widen, but she quickly returns her face to its usual mask. Eris, I hope you're not going to. Oh, but I most certainly am, I interrupt. Just a little later. Silence. She walks away. But I know, she's going to find my father now. I walk along the columns, touching the cold stone. I remember another building, not a museum, but a university laboratory. I remember Lena. I remember the night we first saw the Phoenix gene activate regeneration in human tissue cells. We were silent then. We watched as the code flashed on the screen, as new cells proliferated as if the body were repairing itself. It was like a miracle, but not a divine one, a scientific one. I turned to Lena, wanted to say something and couldn't. There was a lump in my throat. She just took my hand. It was more than any words. I remember the silence when she stayed the night at my place for the first time. No kisses, no promises. Just silence, the warmth of her breath beside me, and a snowstorm raging outside the window. We were inside something important, deep, real. She is my real family, the one I chose. The music starts. The soft sounds of a live orchestra. The stage is decorated with logos, screens, and thin streams of golden light. Everything is perfect. Under control. My father walks onto the stage. The entire room's attention shifts to him. He's getting older. His posture is not as proud as it once was, but his voice still resonates. He speaks of the past, of the company's history, of a mission that unites technology and humanity. I can almost hear Lena snorting somewhere in New Jersey, in front of her monitor. We are in sync even at a distance. We are proud that over the years, Thorne Medical has made the best medicine accessible to millions. If you're a millionaire, I whisper. He continues. Mentions new projects, future investments, the genetic horizons, as he puts it. A year ago, he wouldn't have even uttered the word genetics in a positive context. And now he's waving it like a flag. My flag in his hands, trying to lead it in his parade. I see Julian nodding in the audience. His friends applaud. My father calls him his partner in the vision for the future. I am not mentioned. Of course. My phone vibrates gently. A message from Lena. Just one word. Ready. I exhale. I stand up. All eyes are on the stage. I calmly walk over to the control panel. I worked on this for a month. Not just the science, but how exactly this should look. The blow. It has to be clean. I press a button. The screens freeze. The lights dim. The orchestra falters. People start to turn around. A few seconds of silence. The room holds its breath. And then a flash. A title appears on the screen. The Phoenix Gene, A Path to Universal Tissue Regeneration. By Dr. Eris Thorne. No one is breathing. I can hear my own pulse in my temples. Then a second image. A letter. A real one. A quote. The BioLux project must remain within a private framework. Not a word about broad application. This is an asset for our most valuable clients. Mass access is not feasible. From an internal correspondence of Julian Thorne. People in the room start to whisper. Phones light up. I know that in the inbox of every journalist here, there is already a publication with the full archive of documents. This isn't just a presentation. It's an expose. Not a show, a tribunal. On stage, my father is frozen. Julian has stood up. His face is a flash of horror and fury. He's shouting, but no one is listening. People are reading, watching, thinking. I walk back down. Past faces that turn away. Past acquaintances who now don't know whether to greet me. It doesn't matter. What matters is the truth. It's out. And it's not going back. When I exit the hall, the air outside is different. More real. I don't know what will happen next. But I know one thing. The lies are over. And for the first time in many years, I can breathe freely. Explosions come in different forms. Some are deafening, blinding, leaving behind ash and concrete dust. Others are quiet, like the crack of ice underfoot, followed by a cold abyss. What I had just done was both. Ash and abyss in one. Behind the marble doors of the Egyptian hall, I left faces frozen in a tableau of horror, disbelief, and betrayal. Julian, screaming into the void, trying to grasp at someone's loyalty like a life raft. My father, seized by an almost physical paralysis, clutching the edge of the lectern as if it were the helm of a sinking ship. My mother, I only saw the back of her head, but I know her body language, neck taut, shoulders like strings. Not anger, shock, or perhaps even fear. I walked through the gallery, each step echoing like a hammer blow on the coffin of a closed era. People parted for me. Not with hatred, not yet, but with incomprehension. Some turned away, as if from a strange phenomenon, unsure if they should offer sympathy. Someone was already recording a video. Someone else was on the phone. The system was collapsing, and everyone was deciding whose side they were on. A security guard caught up with me at the exit. Politely, almost apologetically. Dr. Thorne, sir, they've requested that you come to a private room. I could have left. I wanted to leave. But something in me, or perhaps someone, whispered, finish it. All the way. I nodded. Lead the way. The room was not what I expected. Not a conference room. Not an office. It was a museum storage space, converted into a temporary office. A table, 2 sofas, a couple of lamps, and a strange, almost sterile feeling of a place without history. There were no portraits, no family crests. Just walls. And at them, my mother sat with her hands clasped. Her knuckles were white from the strain. My father stood by the wall, his back to me. Julian paced the room like a cornered animal. Carmen stood against the wall, holding her phone and surreptitiously typing messages. I closed the door behind me. Well, I asked, who's going to start? Silence. Then, my mother's voice. Quiet, hoarse. You've destroyed everything, Eris. I smiled. No, Mother. I destroyed an illusion. The truth simply came out. Julian lunged at me. You don't understand what you've done. His voice trembled. You've burned it all down. Everything. We'll be prosecuted. Investors will leave. The shareholders. People will know the truth, Julian. That's worse, isn't it? It's stupid. He stepped closer. You think you're a hero? You're just a bitter nerd who's been jealous his whole life. You wanted to be me, but you never could. You don't know how to live in the real world. I didn't back away. I never wanted to be you, Julian. I've spent my whole life trying not to be you. He raised his hand to strike. It trembled. He couldn't bring himself to do it. Go on, I said. It would be the final act of your performance. My father turned around. Slowly. His face was like stone. He said nothing. Just watched. I felt his gaze on me like a surgical laser, cold, focused, burning away everything extraneous. We raised you, he finally said. We gave you the best education, a roof over your head, a name. And this is how you repay us. I laughed. A roof? A name? You gave me a cage. And now you're furious because I broke out of it. You've destroyed the family's future. My mother's voice shook. You. No. You destroyed it yourselves when you decided you could sell hope for $1 million a dose. The silence was long. Even Carmen, who had been typing furiously, froze. Eris, my father said. We can't stop this. You understand that, don't you? I understand. You'll go down with us. With this name. I looked him in the eyes. I don't carry your name anymore. I'm Eris. Just Eris. And I'm no longer yours. My father lowered his gaze. Something in him broke. Not dramatically. Not theatrically. Almost invisibly. I realized. He wasn't afraid of a trial. He was afraid of being alone. I turned to my mother. You were afraid I'd tell the truth. I told it. Now you can write me off for good. She whispered, I never understood where all this anger in you came from. I stopped at the door. It's not anger. It's purification. I left. Behind me, I heard muffled voices, subdued, as if caught in a whirlpool. Outside, everything was different. Colder. Cleaner. Reporters were waiting outside. I didn't stop. I just walked. I moved through the crowd without looking back. As if I were walking not out of a museum, but out of a dream. My phone vibrated. Lena again. Is it over? I called her. It's over. Yes. She was silent for a moment. Then quietly. Are you scared? I thought about it. No. I feel empty. That's normal. Tomorrow, you'll wake up a different person. I've already woken up. Then, shall we go home? I closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time with relief. Let's go. Later that night, I sat by the window of her apartment. She was asleep beside me. The sound of her breathing was like a metronome. Outside, the city hummed. Somewhere far away, under the glass of skyscrapers, the remnants of the gala still glittered. But they were no longer mine. On the table was a notification from one of the journals. The paper had been published. The world knew. I didn't feel victorious. Only silence. And within that silence, a tiny spark. A beginning. Something new. Something I would build not in spite of, but instead of. And no longer for them. The morning didn't bring enlightenment. It arrived like the final chord of yesterday's symphony. Booming, steel gray, tearing through the glass of New York, unsettling but not unexpected. I didn't wake up with a sense of victory. I woke up with a sense of certainty. Lena was still asleep. The pillow had left an imprint on her cheek, her hair splayed across the UV. She looked tired, not just from the night, but from months of tension that had finally been resolved. I knew she hadn't said all the words of support she wanted to, but she was there, and that was the only thing that mattered. I turned on the news. The first channel, a headline, Thorne Medical Expose, insider documents and a breakthrough in regenerative medicine. The second, scandal at High Society Gala, Eris Thorne versus his own family. The third, CNN, Phoenix Gene, scientific triumph, or the fall of an elite? My face appeared on the screen. I looked tired. A shadow of stubble, a cold gaze, a dark suit, like a witness, not a hero. No pride, no fury. Just facts. And that was right. Because all I wanted was to awaken reality. In the afternoon, I was at the lab. The glass building that Lena and I had built with money from a private foundation, OpenGen. It was small for now, but alive. Real. I walked down the hallway, where the walls were clean but not impersonal. On them were diagrams of our experiments, graphs of results, photos of tissue regenerating without scars. On one of the boards, someone had drawn in marker. Let it burn, so something new can grow. Below it, an arrow and a caption. Thanks, Eris. I stopped. It felt strange, almost uncomfortable. I never sought a cult of personality, but still, for the first time in my life, I felt that somewhere, someone understood me. Lena was in the conference room. Around her were our scientists, not financiers. On the table were documents, graphs, test tubes. I walked in, and she smiled. "How are you?" "I don't know," I admitted, like I just came out of a vacuum. "That's normal." "The vacuum wasn't here, Eris. It was inside you. We held a meeting. We signed protocols to transfer the Phoenix gene to an international open-source bioplatform. This meant that no one could ever monopolize it. Its development was now overseen by 6 independent research centers in different countries. All processes and results were under public scrutiny, with no patents, no paywalls. The world isn't perfect. Yes, someone would still try to adapt it for commercial use. But now, they would have a counterweight. In the voice of science. When I signed the last page, I felt lighter. As if I hadn't just protected my work, but had wrested something much bigger from the hands of predators. The future. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Interviews, calls, press conferences. I was invited on television, on podcasts, even on late-night talk shows. Some tried to frame it as a personal drama, family betrayal, brother against brother, but each time I steered the conversation back to the point. Science is not a business. It's a responsibility. And yes, there were threats. Anonymous letters, whispers in the corridors, attempts to make a deal. But I wasn't alone. Lena was always by my side. The team of growing, inspired. And most importantly, a wave of support. Messages from doctors, patients, students. People who didn't know me but believed in what I had done. One day, I received a letter from a man in India. His daughter suffered from a rare skin condition that caused severe burns from a simple touch. He wrote, "We would never have been able to afford this treatment if it had remained in private hands. Thank you for opening the door." I read it and cried. Quietly, almost silently. But each tear was not for pain. It was for justice. Meanwhile, in the world of the Thorns, the death throes began. The SEC opened an investigation. Documents related to the manipulation of investment capital were uncovered. Julian was summoned to court. My father publicly resigned as chairman of the board. My mother disappeared from the society pages. They were still written about, but now as historical figures, not as drivers of the future. I didn't rejoice. Honestly, it wasn't my triumph. It was a natural correction. Sometimes, people would ask me, what if they had apologized? I would think about it. And each time, I realized it wasn't about an apology. It was about their unwillingness to change. Their mistake wasn't that they didn't understand me. It was that they didn't want to understand humanity. Spring brought change. We opened clinical trials for volunteers with spinal cord injuries. The initial results were promising. Restoration of neural conductivity, regeneration of damaged tissue. It wasn't a miracle yet, but it was a glimmer of light. I started speaking less, appearing on air less. I didn't want to become a symbol. I wanted to be part of a movement, a quiet but reliable pillar. One evening, I was sitting in the lab when Lena came in. She sat beside me in silence and just rested her head on my shoulder. Tired? I asked. No, just thinking. About what? That you didn't just break their world. You broke yours too. Maybe. But now you have a chance to build it anew. Not alone. I sighed. I didn't think it would be this hard. Because you grew up in a place where the walls were made of gold. And you were made of steel. We were silent. Then she added. And you know the difference between gold and steel? What's that? Gold is soft. It breaks under pressure. But steel is forged. And it cuts. I put my arm around her. No more words were needed. A few days later, I was standing in the pediatric ward of a hospital. It was where they were first using experimental drugs based on the Phoenix gene. A little girl, with leukemia, met me outside her room. Are you Dr. Eris? Yes. She handed me a drawing. It was of her, with hair, in a dress. And next to her was me, in a lab coat, holding a shield. Like a hero from a fairy tale. I smiled. You know I don't know how to fight with a shield, right? But you know how to make miracles. I realized. This was it. Not a gala. Not a paper. Not fame. But this drawing. This faith. This was my name. I used to think the hardest part was telling the truth. Bringing it out of the darkness, giving it form, a name, a face. But the truth is only the first step. The real test begins afterward, when you're offered a price for your silence, even after you've already spoken. Almost imperceptibly, other forces began to interfere with our work. Not those that came openly with threats, pressure, or lawsuits. These were far more sophisticated. They offered money, not as a bribe, but as an opportunity to expand our horizons. The first call came from the pharmaceutical giant Medicon Group. Their representative was impeccably polite. "Dr. Thorne, we are thrilled with your discovery. We would like to invest in the development of the Phoenix gene. $1 billion. No strings attached. You will remain at the helm. No strings attached." I laughed. $1 billion? And no strings? Really? Just one, he said softly. Of course, we would like to have the right to commercially license the product in the future, but control will remain with you. Naturally. I thanked him for the call. Then I blocked the number. That was the beginning. It was followed by offers from politicians, from charitable foundations with murky histories, from medical lobbyists. They all had one thing in common. They didn't want access for everyone. They wanted control. And with each passing day, I felt the external pressure becoming not just background noise, but an attempt to seize the flag. I had released the discovery into the world, but now they wanted to tame it, make it safe, manageable, easily integrated into the old system. And therein lay the true paradox. I started fighting my family to save science from corporations. But now that there were hundreds of corporations, each one was offering me their own ethical, smart version of a deal with my conscience. We held an internal meeting. Lena, me, 3 of our lead researchers. The idea proposed by one of our new colleagues sounded logical. Maybe we should create a hybrid model? Part of the treatment remains free, but we also create a commercial protocol for those who want rapid and complete recovery. This would fund the open source research. I listened, and I felt something rising inside me, not fury, but fear. Because he was reasonable. Lena looked at me. "What do you say?" I slowly shook my head. We didn't start this journey to give up halfway. This isn't a project. It's a principle. Silence. Then she nodded. Then we need another way to survive. Without investors. Without compromises. I sighed. Then we'll have to do the impossible. Show the world that scientific truth can be viable without capital. In the following weeks, we launched a crowdfunding campaign. A global initiative. Phoenix for All. We told the story. Not ours. The story of patients. The story of mothers. The story of children treated with early versions of the drug. We show their faces, their recovery, their dreams. Donations came from all over the world. Thousands of dollars from foundations. 5 from school children. 100 from retirees. People believed. Not because we asked, but because we weren't asking for ourselves. It was all difficult. We worked around the clock, cut expenses, slept on cots, personally sterilized equipment to avoid paying for outsourcing. But we held on, because now we had the people. Not an audience, the people, in the old sense of the word. The ones we worked for. One evening, I was sitting on the roof of the laboratory. Gray clouds hung over Manhattan. Cars hummed below. The world went on. The world doesn't notice when something new is growing somewhere. Lena sat down next to me. She was holding a tablet. On the screen was a new letter from the EU's Medical Commission. Preliminary approval for broad clinical trials. Readiness for certification in 5 countries. I said nothing. Just took a deep breath. "We're almost there," I whispered. "Almost," she confirmed. "But there's a problem." "What is it?" "Your parents have filed an appeal with the Intellectual Property Commission. They claim that the concept for the Phoenix gene was developed based on prototypes created with funding from Thorne Medical. They want the discovery to be recognized as their derivative work. It was like a punch to the gut. I was silent for a long time. Then I said, "They don't know how to lose." Lena nodded. "It's not about winning for them. It's about making sure you don't." This was the second front. The legal one. We gathered the documents, the budget estimates, the confirmations of all our grants, the evidence that our research began years after any former contracts. Everything was clean. But it wasn't about being clean. It was about their intention to stall for time, to obstruct distribution, to slow the wave with bureaucracy. And all of this from my family. I called the lawyer who was handling the case on my behalf. He was calm, methodical. "You will win, Dr. Thorne. But the cost will be time and resources. And they know that? Of course. That's why they filed." I didn't sleep for almost 2 days. Then, I just shut down. I collapsed onto my desk right in the lab. I woke up to see Lena. She hadn't slept. She was sitting next to me, stroking my head. I'm sorry, I said. I can't stop. I know. That's why I'm not asking you to. It's all falling apart. No, Eris. It's all being built. I looked at her. For a long time. You were my foundation. She smiled. And you were mine. A month later, the court dismissed the Thorne family's appeal. Officially. Finally. With the finding. It is impossible to recognize intellectual property rights for a discovery made outside the jurisdiction and contractual framework of the corporation. Furthermore, in spirit and purpose, the discovery is oriented toward the public good. I reread it, like a manifesto. A week later, a letter arrived from the WHO. We are prepared to include the Phoenix gene on the list of priority areas for global health. That day, I didn't celebrate. I just went outside, stood on the sidewalk, breathed the air. And I realized now, we could truly begin. I thought that after the court case and the victory on paper, there would be a plateau, a period of calm on which we could build without fighting back. But a victory in bureaucracy doesn't extinguish greed. It only changes its form. Now that the Phoenix gene had become an international priority, attempts to hijack its influence began. Not head-on, not through the courts, through structure, through the system. It started with working groups. The World Health Organization, the European Commission, the Asian Biomedical Alliance. Everyone wanted their stake in standardizing the technology's application. At first glance, it seemed logical. Each region has its own healthcare specifics, its own clinics, its own genetic material. But underneath it all was one thing, the redistribution of control. If you didn't follow the commission-approved methodology, you wouldn't get clearance. And the methodology, as it turned out, was based on outdated protocols incompatible with our data. I called a video conference with representatives from all sides. Please explain, I said, holding their recommendations, why the final documents are missing the base sequence that forms the core of the therapeutic action. Its exclusion makes the procedure not just ineffective, it makes it meaningless. The response was evasive. We decided to base our approach on conservative models until we receive broader data from clinical trials. You have that data, I said. We provided it in full a month ago. We are talking about data recognized by the entire scientific community, the head of the Geneva Committee clarified, softly but firmly. I understood. The politics were starting. That evening, I sat in my office at the lab. In front of me were copies of all the latest publications. They wanted to push me out of my position as the author, replacing me with an abstract, international development group. Not literally, of course. My name would remain, but the meaning would be diluted. Not an individual and a team, but a collective effort. This meant one thing. In the future, any entity, even corporate ones, could manage the project under the guise of a public consortium. I called Lena in. They want to erase the face of the discovery, I said. Erase my face. This isn't about ego, she replied. It's about responsibility. Exactly. If this becomes an anonymous project, no one will be responsible for the consequences. Not for mistakes. Not for attempts at distortion. They'll turn a brilliant tool into a medical franchise. She nodded. We have to act. And fast. We convened an emergency conference in Zurich. Not for journalists. For scientists. No politicians. No businessmen. Only researchers, doctors, bioengineers. People who stand at the operating table, not behind a lectern. I stood on stage before 100 such people. Tired, strong, intelligent. The Phoenix gene cannot be sold. It cannot be altered out of fear. It cannot be turned into a modular platform to suit the needs of investors. We are not merchants. We are not lobbyists. We are scientists. And we have a duty to preserve the integrity of science, or it will die under the weight of correct decisions. There was silence in the hall. Then, slow, cautious applause. Then, a storm of it. A week later, we launched the Charter of Genetic Responsibility, a document signed by leading laboratories and universities, protecting the integrity of the original Phoenix gene scientific model and guaranteeing its application only in accordance with the open protocol. It was a risky move. We were bypassing political mediation, but it was necessary. In response, a pharmaceutical company issued a press release. The charter does not take regional differences into account and hinders the flexible implementation of the innovation. This could jeopardize patient safety. I went on television. Patient safety is our priority. That is precisely why we will not allow commercial variations of the formula that have not undergone public review. What's at stake is not the market. What's at stake is trust. And we will not let this be turned into the new insulin, available on paper, unattainable in life. Lena came up to me after the broadcast. You were too harsh. Yes, but it was clear. She looked at me with concern. They've started to fear you, Eris. Let them be afraid. Better to be feared than to be bought. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about you. I lowered my eyes. I know. Sometimes I hear myself, and I don't recognize the person speaking. You have to be not only strong, but also alive. We returned to the lab. Meanwhile, in several countries, the first therapeutic protocols began to be implemented. Under observation, with patient consent, one of the first clinics opened in Sao Paulo. The patient, a 12-year-old boy, after an accident, paralyzed from the waist down. After 6 weeks, the first signs of movement. After 3 months, he was able to take a step. The video went viral. It wasn't staged. There was no music. Just a white hospital room, a boy in a walker, his mother crying on her knees, and the words. Eu consegui. Eu andei. I did it. I'm walking. That video circled the globe. Millions watched it. And that's when something changed. Not in the system. In the people. People started asking, when will we have it? Where? Why isn't it available? Politicians, even those who had been dragging their feet, began to hurry. The question was no longer, can we implement this? But why haven't we started yet? And then I understood, the truth is not a weapon. It's a light. You can't force it. You can only cover it up, but not forever. One day, a letter arrived. Handwritten. On heavy paper with a gold crest. Eris, you destroyed everything we built. But maybe that was your role. Mother. I read it for a long time. Then I burned it. Not out of hatred. Out of finality. One night, I stood in an empty corridor of the lab. I looked out the windows. Lights glowed over New York. Somewhere out there, the old world was raging. And I was here. In the silence. My own. Lena came up and hugged me from behind. Do you want to go back? She asked. I shook my head. I don't know where back is anymore. All that's left is to go forward. Then go, she whispered. But I'm right here with you. And we went, following the light, wherever it led. Spring entered the city almost unnoticed, not through warmth, but through light. It became softer, deeper, as if even the concrete of New York was beginning to breathe. The work continued. Protocols expanded. New clinics opened in South Korea, the Czech Republic, Namibia. The model we had defended, open, accessible, honest, was proving its viability. Day by day, we saw the impossible become routine. And then, the first alarming report came. It was from a doctor in line. Her patient was a 48-year-old man with an aggressive form of pancreatic cancer. He had been admitted to an expanded Phoenix gene program in its late stages, under a humanitarian protocol. The first week went normally. In the second, his white blood cell count began to spike. In the third, he developed tissue hyperplasia. The proliferation is chaotic, Dr. Bowdry said over a video call. We've stopped the treatment, administered immunosuppressants, but his body's reactions are unstable. It's as if something inside him started growing without regulation. I felt a coldness spread through me. Send all the data. Immediately. Lena and I locked ourselves in the analysis room. We looked at the graphs, the biomarkers, the DNA profiles. Everything looked almost normal. Almost. See this? She said, pointing to a sequence. He has a rare mutation on chromosome 18. It's not an activation mutation. On the contrary, it usually makes cell replication less likely. But here, it seems to have entered into a paradoxical interaction with our code. The Phoenix genes amplified the defect instead of correcting it. We've treated hundreds of patients. None have had this response. Is this a unique coincidence? I stared silently at the screen. And for the first time in many months, I felt fear. Maybe not the only one. Maybe we just don't know everything our technology is capable of. I couldn't sleep that night. Alone in the lab, I turned on the mirror server, an autonomous copy of the entire project database. I opened a simulation I hadn't run since the initial testing phases, potential evolutionary trajectories of the Phoenix gene's impact on variable gene clusters. When I hit Run, the screen slowly began to fill with graphs, fractals, and mutation trees. 2 hours later, I understood the main point. We hadn't just discovered a mechanism for repair. We had discovered a mechanism for mutational acceleration. In 99.7% of cases, it acted as intended, restoring, healing, regenerating. But in the other 0.3%, it became an accelerator of the unknown. I called an emergency meeting of the project board. We have to temporarily halt all new applications of the drug. Completely. Eris, one of the lead doctors, countered. We have thousands of patients whose lives this is literally saving. I know. But if we lose control of even one scenario, we risk not only their lives. We risk the entire idea. That decision cost me dearly. I received messages from parents, doctors, patients. You've betrayed us. You've given in to fear. You've halted progress. I read them all and remained silent. One night in the lab, a technician approached me. A quiet but observant young man named Rahul. He said, I found something. In one of the code fragments. An unexplained anomaly. A signature I don't recognize. What do you mean? A signature? A subloop. As if a module was embedded by someone from the outside. Very subtly. It's not active under standard conditions, but in the presence of certain mutations, it starts to unfold. I felt something cold clench in my chest. Show me. He brought a fragment of code up on the screen. This isn't from our lab, he said. I checked the archives. Neither you, nor Lena, nor any of the developers wrote these lines. So, sabotage? He shrugged. Or someone added this before we did. Before the final stage. Possibly back in the Thorn medical days. It was like a blow. I contacted Lena. Can we confirm this? We're working on it. But if it's true, then we don't even know what we've been dealing with all this time. Not just a scientific risk. A booby trap. A bio-coded mine. Someone wanted to use us? Or use you? We went back to the archives. To Thorn Medical's old servers. There, in the depths of backup copies, we found code fragments signed with old keys. One of them belonged to Julian. Did he interfere with the code himself? Probably not. He might have given someone access. That's when we remembered, in those very days when he was calling, begging us to share the discovery, there was a moment. He asked for a copy of the prototype for an internal audit. We gave it to him. He promised it was only to assess its potential. And if someone had embedded a subtle mutation into that copy, and it then, through the replication system, ended up in the final protocol. We need him. I told Lena. We have to question him. He won't make contact. Then we need a trail that leads us to whoever did this. We sent an analysis team into Thorn Medical's digital archives, while Rahul began tracking signature matches. A week later, he came to me. Found it. This fragment appears in 2 other projects, in an experimental line of biotechnologies funded by a company called Synthicor, registered in Singapore. The founder is one of Julian's former advisors. Name him. Daniel Hart. Biophysicist. Specialist in adaptive viruses. Daniel Hart. I had heard of him. He had once been fired from Harvard for attempting to commercialize a dangerous mutation. His research was officially banned in many countries. If he was behind the interference, then we weren't facing a mistake. We were facing intent. I looked at Lena. We thought we were fighting corporations. But we're at war with a shadow. She nodded. And now we have to understand what exactly we've unleashed upon the world. Thus began the second phase of our mission. Not to create, but to dismantle, to identify, to neutralize. We were no longer pioneers. We had become guardians. And soldiers. Daniel Hart's name surfaced in our investigation like an oil slick, thin, slippery, and reeking of decay. His trail led through a chain of shell companies, disappearing servers, and patents bought up by anonymous funds. Everything pointed to a man who preferred to operate not in the open, but from the shadows of science, where ethics are optional and the boundaries of possibility are a challenge, not a warning. Synthicor. A phantom laboratory. We knew only one thing. They were developing adaptive vector platforms capable of interacting with the human genome in real time. It sounded like science fiction. And like a threat. We arranged a meeting with a former Synthicor employee, a bioinformatician named Li Zhao. He had vanished from the company 2 years ago and gone deep underground, changing his name, passport, and continent. He showed up for the meeting in Lisbon, in a semi-basement cafe, wearing a hood and the look of a man who had lived in fear for too long. You come for the truth, he asked. For a piece of it. About Phoenix. About Hart. About what he embedded in our code. He was silent, then cautiously nodded. I was part of the group that tested evolutionary contours. They were hypothetical DNA segments capable of unfolding functions depending on environmental conditions, temperature, hormone levels, signaling proteins. Conditional expression, I clarified. Not just that. They learned. They adapted. The code unfolded like a Mobius strip. Self-sustaining, self-editing. They were called molecular mirrors. Are you saying they could analyze, predict, and change their course of action? Yes. It was biological artificial intelligence. Hart dreamed of a system that wouldn't just heal, but would evolve within a person, forever, without the need for intervention. He used to say, medicine is yesterday. The genome is forever. I felt a chill run down my spine. Did he test it on people? Unofficially, yes. But most of the models were too unstable. Or too aggressive. The last known vector was called Prometheus 4. It was shut down. Or, so we thought. I glanced at Lena. Prometheus. The god who stole fire from the gods. And gave it to humans. A fire that then burned down cities, she whispered. Back in New York, we began an emergency audit of all samples and protocols related to Phoenix. We paid special attention to versions that had come from Thorne Medical before our publishing bombshell. In one of the archived prototypes, we found it. Prometheus 4. Embedded as a backup module. It wasn't active under standard conditions, but it contained a variable with a self-adjusting trigger. It was like a time loop inside the code. Everything pointed to one thing. The Phoenix gene, which we thought was our discovery, had contained a parasite from the beginning. Or a chrysalis. We have to stop everything, I said when our internal group gathered. We've already halted deployment, Lena reminded me. I mean, globally. We need to declare a biological quarantine. Do you realize how that will be perceived? Rahul asked. You'll turn yourself into a boogeyman. And the entire project into a threat to humanity. I closed my eyes. Better that than to be proven right after a catastrophe. We held an international press conference. I said, our project, however benevolent, contains a fragment of code whose origin we do not control. While the probability of danger is low, its price is unacceptable. Therefore, we are suspending all clinical applications of the technology until a full, multi-level revision and recoding is complete. No exceptions. For anyone. The reaction from journalists, officials, and patients was explosive. Some called me a hero. Some a traitor. Conspiracy theories emerged. Thorne knew all along. This is a diversion from competitors. This is a new form of biological control. But I was ready. Because I knew that if Prometheus began to activate under real-world conditions, the consequences would be unpredictable. One day, at dawn, I stepped out onto the Institute's terrace. It was cold. Damp concrete under my feet, a wind that smelled of the sea. Lena approached. Sat beside me. Do we have any allies left? I asked. Yes. Those who understand that the truth isn't a wall. It's a passage. Through pain. Through chaos. To the light. And you? Are you still with me? She didn't answer. She just took my hand. And I needed nothing more. That same day, we received a letter. Not an email. A paper one. Sealed. No return address. Inside was a short note. I knew you would find it. It wasn't a mistake. It was an experiment. And you have proven its success. Deech. In the envelope was a flash drive. We connected it in an isolated environment. Inside was a single video. Hart. Older. Gaunt. With eyes full of a mad light. Eris, you opened the door. I gave you the key. You chose to use it. Phoenix wasn't a mistake. It was a bridge. Between evolution and choice. People fear change. But you are already different. You think you can stop this? You are already a carrier. See you. Very soon. I felt the blood drain from my face. At that moment, I wasn't sure if he was joking or telling the truth. Lena looked at me. Do you feel different? Anything? Unusual? I shook my head. But it was a lie. Dreams. The last few nights, there were dreams. Strange ones. As if someone inside me was looking out. The next morning, I gave blood. A full analysis. A genetic profile. The deepest sequencing we had in our arsenal. I looked at the numbers. The curves. The fluctuations. And I saw it. Changes. Inside me. Already. No amount of preparation, not one simulation, not a single paper in the journal cell could have prepared me for what I saw. A new cluster had appeared in my own DNA. It wasn't just the result of a mutation. It was an inserted, active vector. Complex, adaptive, dynamically responding to my body's metabolic impulses. I knew what the original Phoenix gene looked like. I wrote it myself. This was different. It resembled a branching tree, each branch possessing a self-regulating loop. A genome that could change, depending on me. And it was alive. That's impossible, Lena whispered, looking at my biomarkers. Even if Prometheus somehow activated, it should have remained latent. It needs triggers, inflammation, shock, chemical intervention. I silently opened my tablet and showed her. The moment my mutation began, I was in the lab, inhaling vapors from an unstabilized sample medium Rahul was working with. It was only 20 seconds, but it was enough to activate a latent carrier if it was already dormant inside. So Hart was telling the truth, she breathed. He used you as a vessel, or as the first prototype. I remembered the dreams. At first, just fragments, dark corridors, pulsating structures, glowing formations resembling neural networks. Then feelings. I began to anticipate what changes would occur in the experimental cultures before I even ran the analysis. My brain was adapting. Or, maybe not just yours, Rahul said. He was looking at his own analysis. What do you mean? I ran the tests. Li Zhao also had a change, microscopic, but identical in signature. And now, after our last work with the Thorne Medical Archives, I'm also starting to see anomalies. You're infected? Not infected. I'd say upgraded. A hypothesis emerged. Prometheus, for wasn't just triggered by a viral vector. It could spread on its own if the conditions were right. Through biological fluids, perhaps even through skin contact or respiration. The mechanism was too new to be classified. And so we did what we had to do. We locked ourselves in quarantine. One floor of the institute, hermetically sealed. Just Lena, Rahul, me, and 2 neurobiologists. We plunged into absolute isolation. Our bodies became experiments. Again, only this time, we didn't control the protocols. The first few days were stable. And then the changes began. Rahul's sensory sensitivity increased. He could determine the spectrum of electromagnetic radiation with Hertz-level precision. Lena's cognitive function accelerated. She was writing formulas faster than she could speak. I developed the ability to see data models in a stream, without visualization, as if my brain itself had become a computational model. But there were dark signals too. Pulsations in my bones. Alien memories surfacing in dreams. Strange impulses as if someone were peeking out from within. One day, at dawn, Lena stood by the glass. Her hand was trembling. I dreamed. I became a tree, with roots. They went deep into the earth, and I felt everything, as if I were part of something bigger. And it wasn't scary. It was beautiful. I looked at her. What if Hart wasn't trying to destroy? What if he was trying to create a new biological order? Then why the secrecy? I shrugged. Because the old order would never have accepted it. On the 7th day of self-isolation, the alarm went off. A signal from the International Biological Risk Monitoring Network. Anomalous tissue samples had been registered in patients who had undergone treatment with the Phoenix program in Argentina, India, and Estonia. The same mutations that had begun to unfold in us were already activating in others. Spontaneously, without external stimuli. There were dozens of them. It's a chain reaction, Rahul said. We're no longer the starting point. We're just the early signals. It was then that we decided there was no way out. This couldn't be stopped. It was already in the world. There were 2 options. Hide. Go underground. Wait it out. Accept. Enter the system. Start managing it before it was too late. We chose the second. A day later, we organized a closed video conference with the world's leading geneticists. No media. No politicians. We showed them everything. Sequencing data. Mutation mechanisms. The consequences. At the end, I said, we are facing a new phase. Not technological. Evolutionary. We did not create this consciously, but now we are in it. We have 2 choices. Try to suppress it and lose. Or understand. Accept. Adapt. I am not asking for your consent. I am asking for your awareness. We are no longer just Homo sapiens. We are something else. The question isn't whether the transformation will happen. The question is whether we will participate in it consciously or not. The silence lasted for almost a minute. Then one of the scientists, an elderly Japanese man, Professor Nakamura, said quietly, "Perhaps this is how the next cycle of civilization begins." And in that moment, I understood. Everything that had come before, the fight with my family, with corporations, with lies, was merely a prelude. The true story was beginning now. With us. With this generation. With this mistake. With this opportunity. And I was no longer alone. The world seemed to stand on the threshold of an invisible yet palpable change, as if the very air around us had begun to vibrate at frequencies only a few could hear. Lena, Rahul, and I understood that the news of the mutation we were witnessing was not just a scientific discovery, but a challenge to all of humanity. News of the activation of Prometheus 4 and its self-regulating vectors began to spread like wildfire. Global media, academic circles, and governments fell into a state of simultaneous panic and skepticism. Some called us new prophets, while others dismissed us as madmen playing with nature. But no one could remain indifferent. We organized an international forum, bringing together leading geneticists, bioethicists, UN representatives, and key politicians. There, under the dazzling lights of cameras and spotlights, we publicly acknowledged for the first time the existence of a new stage of evolution, a biological transition driven not only by natural selection but also by technology. Many were afraid and called for an immediate halt to all research related to genetic regeneration. Others, in contrast, saw it as a chance to create a new generation of humans with enhanced abilities, capable of adapting to a changing world. Meanwhile, my own changes were accelerating. I began to feel my body reconfiguring itself from within. My muscle tissue became more resilient, my vision sharper, and my mind more focused and swift. Sometimes I saw fleeting flashes of future events, as if sensing them before they happened. It was both terrifying and inspiring. However, not everyone shared my optimism. Certain groups of influential politicians and businessmen, fearing the loss of control over the world and its technologies, began to create their own programs to suppress or control the new code. They believed that only through strict control and limited access to technology could chaos and destabilization be avoided. In response, I issued a call for global cooperation, emphasizing the need for an ethical and transparent approach to this new biological stage. My message was clear. We stand at a crossroads. It is up to us whether we turn this transformation into a new era for humanity or allow fear and greed to tear our society apart. We must unite, scientists, politicians, citizens, not just to survive, but to thrive. Alongside the public resonance, personal changes were also taking place. Lena, whose cognitive abilities were reaching unprecedented heights, proposed new theories about the interaction of Prometheus with consciousness. Rahul, feeling as though he were connected to an invisible network, began to explore the possibilities of collective thought. For me, however, it became increasingly clear that a much larger game was hidden deep within this process, not just biological, but political. The Thorne family and their corporate allies, having lost control of the technology, now wanted to regain their influence at any cost, using all possible means, including blackmail and sabotage. During this period, I received a troubling message from one of our employees. They had detected an attempt to breach our systems and leak data related to our research. This was not just corporate espionage. Someone was trying to set a chance at life, thanks to our efforts. This was more than just recognition. It was the meaning behind everything we were doing. And I understood. My path was not just about science or family. It was about humanity, about every one of us. About how, from the ashes of the old world, a new one is born. Meanwhile, the tension surrounding the Phoenix gene reached its peak. The corporate structures that had lost control of the technology were not going to give up without a fight. New, more sophisticated methods were being used against us: information wars, cyber attacks, and even attempts at physical intimidation. One day, intruders broke into the institute, attempting to steal samples and data. Fortunately, our security and technical systems worked flawlessly, but it became clear the war for the future was being fought not with words, but with actions. In response, we strengthened our collaboration with international organizations that supported open access to scientific data and the promotion of ethical standards. A committee on the ethics of new biotechnologies was established, becoming a platform for dialogue between scientists, lawmakers, and society. Inside the institute, life was bustling. Lena led a program to research the neurobiological aspects of the gene, opening new horizons and understanding consciousness and memory. Rahul developed protocols for the safe use of the technology in medicine and industry. I focused on managing the team and maintaining the balance between the drive for discovery and our responsibility to humanity. However, the pressure from the Thorne family did not let up. Their public speeches and campaigns continued to discredit our work. Articles filled with lies and manipulation began to appear in the media, designed to sow fear and doubt. Particularly painful was the interference of Julian, who used his connections to try to block the Institute's funding and create legal obstacles. But amidst this struggle, we found support in unexpected places. Social media and independent journalists actively covered our successes, publishing interviews and stories of patients whose lives had been changed by the Phoenix gene. Public opinion gradually shifted from fear to hope. During this period, I faced a personal trial. My changes became more and more noticeable, raising questions and fear among those around me. Sometimes I felt a sense of alienation, even from those who were close to me. But Lena and Rahul supported me, helping me cope with my internal conflicts. One day, I received an unexpected call from my mother. Her voice was tinged with weariness and regret. "Eris," she said, "I see you are following your own path. Maybe we were wrong. Maybe we should try to understand each other." It was the first step toward reconciliation, which I took as a sign that even the strongest walls can be broken down by the light of truth. Inspired by this, I intensified our efforts for openness and dialogue, organizing a series of public lectures and forums where people could ask questions, express concerns, and receive honest answers. These events became a bridge between science and society, helping to overcome the barriers of misunderstanding. And although the battle continued, I felt that we were moving toward a new world, a world where technology serves humanity and not the other way around. A world where everyone has a right to a future. As the sun set, New York glittered with lights, reflecting off the glass facades of buildings and creating the sense that the city had a life of its own. The Metropolitan Museum of Art, where the event was held, became an arena for the clash of old and new, a symbol of the struggle between established traditions and the future that my team and I were trying to build. When I entered the Hall of Egyptian Art, a sense of calm confidence filled me. I was in a simple yet elegant suit, not as the son of an influential family, but as a scientist who had come to declare the truth. My place at a distant table, near the kitchen, was familiar. It symbolized my separation from those who had once called me their own. But now, I saw myself not as an outcast, but as a man with a mission. The ceremony began. My father stood on stage, his words about legacy and service to humanity ringing false and empty. The hall was thick with a hypocrisy I had long ceased to tolerate. And then I knew it was time to change the game. With a slight movement of my hand, I gave Lena the signal. Through a video call on my phone, she activated the broadcast. The large screens on either side of the stage flickered and went dark, causing everyone to freeze in anticipation. Instead of the usual logo, a document appeared, the first page of my research paper. The Phoenix Gene, A Path to Universal Tissue Regeneration, by Dr. Eris Thorne. Beneath the text, the very same email flashed Julian's message to our father, revealing the true plans for monetization and restricted access. The hall erupted in whispers and outrage. At the same time, the guests received notifications. A leading scientific journal had published my work, and the New York Times had run an exclusive story on the corporate machinations. My father froze, his face pale. Julian leaped to his feet, shouting accusations of espionage and slander, but it was too late. The truth was out, and with it, the carefully constructed facade crumbled. Chaos engulfed the room. Security guards quickly escorted the key figures into a private room. My mother lashed out at me in anger. "You've destroyed everything." I calmly replied, "A reputation built on lies is not a reputation, Mother. It's a prison." Today, I set myself free. Julian begged me to retract the accusations, but I stood firm. "The game is over. You have no one left to manipulate." I walked out of the room, leaving the wreckage of the past behind me. The corridors seemed filled with the freshness of change. This was my new path, a path of honesty, freedom, and responsibility. Months later, as the dust from the Thorne medical scandal began to settle, I stood on the campus of a new research institute. This center, the fruit of the labor of many minds and hearts, was dedicated to making the Phoenix Gene a tool for all, not just for the chosen few. The road had been long and winding. My father and Julian had left the company, and Thorne Medical itself was under intense scrutiny from regulatory bodies. Their empire, built on control and secrets, was collapsing. But I knew, destruction is only the beginning. True construction is a labor where there is no room for ego and ambition, only the desire to help and create. That day, I received a letter from the mother of a 10-year-old girl awaiting a kidney transplant. She wrote about how, thanks to our research, her daughter had been given a chance at a new life. Attached was a child's drawing, clumsy but touching, of a microscope and a stick figure in a lab coat. This was the recognition I had craved my entire life. I was no longer the rejected son of the Thorne family. I was Dr. Eris Thorne, a scientist, a mentor, a healer. My legacy did not reside in family albums or corporate reports. It lived in the lives I helped save. I often reflect on the past and how it shapes us, but it does not have to define our future. Each of us can choose our own path and build our own legacy. What will your first step be? What promise to the future are you willing to make to yourself today?